In the pitch black of the Arctic Ocean, a shark swims that was already alive when George Washington was born. It moves so slowly you could outswim it in a wheelchair, yet it has outlived kings, empires, and every other shark on Earth. This is the Greenland shark, and it might live to be 500 years old, longer than any creature with a backbone in the history of the planet. Today we uncover a body built like a swimming coffin, eyes eaten alive by a glowing parasite, and flesh so poisonous it can kill a dog in minutes. We meet a giant that swallowed a whole reindeer, antlers and all, and a genome twice the size of your own, packed with a secret trick against cancer and time itself. We ask the question nobody can fully answer. Is this creature a hunter, or a ghost that only feeds on the dead? If this kind of mystery grips you, hit like and subscribe. It helps more of these stories reach you. Take a breath, sink into the cold. We begin. A fisherman pulls a heavy line up through grey water off the coast of Iceland expecting cod. Instead, something enormous breaks the surface. Grey, thick and ancient looking, with tiny eyes and a body like a rolled up rug. He has just met the Greenland shark, one of the strangest animals still alive on Earth. Most people have never heard its name. It doesn't headline movies like the Great White. It does not thrill divers like the Hammerhead. It hides in the coldest, darkest water on the planet, and for most of human history, it stayed almost completely unknown. Fishermen who caught it usually threw it back, calling it a nuisance, a waste of a hook. They had no idea they were holding the oldest living vertebrate on Earth. A vertebrate is any animal with a backbone, and that group includes humans, dogs, birds, and every fish you can think of. Out of every single one of them, on land or in the sea, one animal outlasts them all. The Greenland shark can live for centuries. Scientists now believe some living Greenland sharks were already swimming when the Renaissance was happening, when Leonardo da Vinci was still alive. Picture a school bus. Now picture that school bus, alive, breathing, moving through freezing black water with no rush at all, because it has nowhere to be and centuries to get there. That is close to the size and speed of this shark. It grows up to 24 feet long, heavier than a pickup truck, and yet it swims slower than a person walking. For centuries, this shark was a mystery wrapped in ice. It lived so deep and so far north that almost nobody saw it alive. Sailors told stories about a monster shark that ate whatever it wanted, including things that should never end up in a shark's stomach. Locals in Greenland and Iceland caught it by accident more than on purpose. They knew its meat could make a person sick, though nobody understood exactly why yet. Only in the last 15 years have scientists cracked open its biggest secrets. They found a way to measure its true age, and the number was so extreme that scientists at first thought their equipment was broken. They studied its eyes and found a parasite feeding directly on them. They opened its stomach and found remains that made zero sense for a slow, sluggish fish to be eating. Every discovery about the Greenland shark breaks a rule. It should be small if it grows this slowly, but it is huge. It should barely see, but new research says its eyes still work. It should not be able to catch fast prey, but somehow it does. This is a creature built entirely out of exceptions. It survives by breaking almost every pattern we expect from a living thing. Scientists studying it are not just cataloguing a strange fish. They are hunting for secrets buried inside its blood, its eyes, and its DNA. Secrets that could explain why some living things age and die fast, while others barely seem to age at all. Before we reach those secrets, we need to go where this shark actually lives, a place with almost no light, crushing pressure, and water cold enough to stop a human heart in minutes. That is where the real story begins. Drop a thermometer into the water where the Greenland shark swims, and it might read close to 28 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to freeze fresh water solid. Only the salt in the ocean keeps it liquid. This is the world of the Greenland shark, the coldest ocean habitat any shark species calls home. It lives across the North Atlantic and the Arctic Ocean, in the waters around Greenland, Iceland, Norway and Canada. Some have even been spotted much farther south, all the way down near warm Caribbean reefs, swimming at depths so deep that the freezing Arctic-like conditions still exist even near the equator. Depth matters more than location for this shark. It can dive down nearly 2,000 meters, more than twice as deep as the height of the tallest skyscraper on Earth turned upside down and dropped into the ocean. At those depths, sunlight does not exist. Zero. Not dim light, not shadows, total darkness. All day, every day, all year. Imagine standing in a closet with the door shut and a blanket over your head. Now imagine living your entire life that way, hunting, eating, growing, for hundreds of years, never once seeing true daylight. The pressure down there would crush a human body like a soda can. For the Greenland shark, this is simply home. Its body is built for it, filled with pressure-resistant tissue and a slow, careful metabolism that does not need much oxygen or energy to keep running. That slow metabolism is the real key to understanding this shark. Metabolism is how fast your body burns energy to survive. A hummingbird has an extremely fast metabolism. Its heart beats over 1,000 times a minute. The Greenland shark sits at the opposite extreme. Its body runs so slowly that scientists compare it to a car engine idling at the lowest possible speed, using barely any fuel, moving barely at all. This slow pace connects directly to the cold water around it. Cold temperatures naturally slow down chemical reactions, including the reactions happening inside a living body. The colder the water, the slower the shark's heart beats. The slower it digests food, the slower it even grows. Some scientists believe this extreme slowness is the exact reason the Greenland shark can live so incredibly long. Everything inside it happens in slow motion, including the process of aging itself. Unlike sharks that need to keep swimming constantly to breathe, the Greenland shark can hover almost motionless in open water, barely moving a muscle, conserving every bit of energy. Researchers using tracking tags have followed sharks drifting through the deep for days, covering only a few miles, in no rush, with nowhere to be. This freezing, lightless, crushing world would kill most animals in minutes. For the Greenland shark, it is simply the price of admission to outliving every other creature with a backbone on the planet. But surviving that world is only step one. To understand how strange this animal really is, we need to see what it actually looks like up close, and the picture is stranger than most people expect. Stretch a school bus out across a parking lot, then imagine a shark almost as long swimming silently beside it. The Greenland shark can reach lengths of 24 feet, roughly the same size as one of these buses, making it one of the largest shark species alive today, rivaling the size of the great white shark. Most people picture great white sharks when they think giant shark. The Greenland shark grows just as large, sometimes larger, yet almost nobody has heard of it. That gap between size and fame says everything about how hidden this animal has stayed from human eyes. A fully grown Greenland shark can weigh over 2,200 pounds, heavier than a small car. Its body is thick, round and heavy, built more like a stretched-out barrel than a sleek predator. There is nothing streamlined or flashy about it. It looks less like a hunter built for speed, and more like a slow, ancient tank drifting through the dark. Here is where the size becomes genuinely strange. The Greenland shark grows at an incredibly slow rate, about half an inch to 1 inch per year. Compare that to a great white shark, which can grow several inches in a single year during its younger life. If two baby sharks were born on the same day, one a great white and one a Greenland shark, the great white would already be an adult while the Greenland shark was still basically a newborn. Reaching 24 feet at that growth rate takes an enormous amount of time. Scientists realize that a shark this large, growing this slowly, must be far older than any shark ever recorded. The math simply did not work any other way. If you know a plant grows 1 inch a year, and you find one that is 100 feet tall, you already know it did not grow overnight. The same logic applies here, except with a living, breathing predator instead of a tree. This slow, steady growth ties directly back to the shark's frozen habitat and idling metabolism. Every part of its body follows the same unhurried rhythm, growing, healing, digesting, all stretched out across a timeline that makes a human lifetime look like a blink. Female Greenland sharks tend to grow larger than males, often reaching the biggest sizes recorded for the species. Scientists believe the biggest, oldest individuals caught by accident in fishing nets could be pushing close to 500 years old, though most estimates land closer to around 300 to 400 years for the very largest sharks studied so far. A shark this size, growing this slowly, in water this cold, was never going to behave like an ordinary fish. Its entire body, from its bones to its skin to its blood, had to evolve strange solutions just to survive that timeline. And the strangest of those solutions starts with what its body actually looks like up close. Picture a shark's body dragged through freezing water for centuries, worn smooth by time, mottled grey and brown like old stone. That is the Greenland shark. Up close, it looks less like the sharks you've seen in movies and more like something pulled from a much older, stranger branch of the animal kingdom. Its skin is thick, rough, and often covered in dark blotches or faint stripes, giving it a mottled, almost camouflaged look, similar to how a moth's wings blend into tree bark. Its fins are small and stubby compared to its massive body, nothing like the tall, dramatic dorsal fin you picture on a great white. A great white's fin slices through the surface like a warning sign. The Greenland shark barely has a fin worth noticing, because it does not need one. It is not built for dramatic bursts through the waves. It is built for a life spent almost entirely below them. Its snout is short and rounded, and its mouth sits low, packed with rows of teeth built for a very specific job. The top teeth are narrow and pointed, used mostly to grip. The bottom teeth are wide, flat and interlocking, almost like a saw blade. When the shark clamps onto flesh, it does something unusual for a predator. It rotates its entire body in a tight circle, using those bottom teeth to slice out a neat, round plug of meat, almost like using a cookie cutter on solid tissue. Its eyes are small, often clouded, and sit slightly forward on its head. We will come back to those eyes soon, because what lives on them is one of the most disturbing details in this entire story. Now, for the truly strange part. Cut open a Greenland shark, and its flesh is packed with unusually high levels of two chemicals, urea and a compound called trimethylamine oxide. Every shark carries some amount of these chemicals, since they help balance salt levels inside a shark's body, compared to the salty ocean around it, a process called osmoregulation. The Greenland shark carries an extreme amount, far more than almost any other shark species alive. This is not a flaw. It is a survival tool, similar to antifreeze in a car engine. These chemicals help protect the shark's cells from the brutal combination of freezing temperatures and crushing deep sea pressure, keeping its body from essentially breaking down in conditions that would destroy most other animals. The trade-off is that this same protective chemistry makes its flesh toxic if eaten fresh, a secret we will return to later in this story. Every strange feature of this shark's body, the dull colour, the stubby fins, the circular teeth, the chemical-soaked flesh, points toward the same conclusion. This is not a broken or unfinished predator. This is a highly specialised survival machine, engineered by evolution for one purpose, enduring an environment almost no other animal can handle. But having the right body is only part of the puzzle. The way it moves through that environment is even stranger. A seal glides past, fast and alert, cutting through the water at speeds that would leave most predators behind in seconds. Nearby, a Greenland shark drifts at a pace slower than a person walking down the street, roughly half a mile per hour under normal conditions. On paper, it should never be able to catch anything. Yet somehow, seals turn up inside its stomach again and again. The Greenland shark holds one of the slowest average swimming speeds ever recorded for any shark species. For decades, scientists assumed this meant it had to be a pure scavenger, an animal that only eats things that are already dead, floating carcasses it stumbles across by chance in the dark. A slow-moving animal chasing down a fast-moving seal seemed almost impossible, like a tortoise trying to catch a rabbit in an open field. But stomach research told a different story. Seal remains found inside sharks sometimes showed signs the prey had still been alive and warm when eaten, not scavenged carrion. So how does one of the slowest sharks on the planet manage to catch one of the fastest swimmers in the Arctic? The answer may come down to strategy rather than speed. Seals in cold Arctic waters sometimes sleep while floating near the surface, resting in a state where they barely move, an adaptation that may help them avoid exhausted polar bear attacks on land. A resting, motionless seal gives a slow predator exactly the opening it needs. The Greenland shark does not need to outswim its prey. It only needs to approach unnoticed and strike before the seal wakes up, an ambush built entirely around patience instead of speed. There is another twist. Divers and researchers working directly with Greenland sharks have recorded them capable of short, sudden bursts of speed, quick accelerations far faster than their normal lazy drift. Picture a car that spends most of its life parked, idling quietly, but can suddenly slam the gas pedal down for a few seconds when it truly needs to. The shark seems to save its energy for these rare, explosive moments, rather than wasting it on constant fast swimming. This matches perfectly with everything we already know about its slow metabolism. Speed costs energy, and energy is something this shark guards carefully. The same way a hiker rations water on a long desert trail, constant fast swimming would burn through fuel reserves far too quickly for an animal built to survive on almost nothing, for centuries at a time, so the picture becomes clearer. This is not a broken or failed predator limping through the ocean. It is a patient one, built around stealth, ambush, and precisely timed bursts of energy rather than a non-stop chase. Slow is not weakness here. Slow is strategy. And that same extreme patience, that same total resistance to rushing anything, may be the exact key to the biggest mystery surrounding this shark. Because an animal built to do everything slowly might also be an animal built to age slowly. That mystery, the true age of the Greenland shark, is where this story turns from strange to almost unbelievable. Slice open the ear bone of an average fish, and you can count its age almost like counting the rings inside a tree stump, each ring marking 1 year of life. Scientists have used this trick for decades on countless species, but when researchers tried it on the Greenland shark, they hit a wall. There was nothing to count. Most sharks and bony fish grow hardened structures over time, like ear bones or certain types of scales that build up invisible layers year after year. Cut through the layers, count the rings, and you get a fairly reliable age estimate, similar to counting growth rings inside a cross-section of an old oak tree. The Greenland shark breaks that method completely. Its skeleton is made of cartilage, the same flexible, bendable material that shapes your nose and ears, and it lacks the hardened, calcified structures that other long-lived fish species use to record their age. There were no rings to count, no clear timeline hidden inside its bones. For a species that scientists already suspected might live an unusually long time, this was a serious problem, like trying to measure a mountain with a ruler that keeps disappearing halfway through. For years, researchers were stuck making rough guesses based only on how big the sharks were, and how slowly they seemed to grow. Rough guesses were not good enough. Some scientists suspected these sharks might live over 100 years. Others thought the number could be far higher, maybe even hundreds of years, but without solid proof it remained pure speculation, a debate with no clear winner. One marine biologist studying the species put it bluntly. It felt almost unbelievable that scientists could not say for certain whether this shark lived to 20 years old or 1,000 years old. That is an enormous gap of uncertainty for any living creature, especially one holding the title of one of the largest predators in the entire Arctic Ocean. The lack of an obvious biological clock left this shark's true age as one of the biggest open questions in all of marine biology. Every attempt to measure it the traditional way failed. Every method used successfully on other long-lived animals, whales, turtles, ancient trees, simply did not apply here. Then a small team of researchers had an unusual idea. Instead of looking at bones, they turned toward a part of the body nobody expected to hold the answer at all. A part of the eye that, unlike almost every other tissue, never changes once it forms before birth. That single insight was about to crack open one of the strangest scientific mysteries of the last century. Deep inside every vertebrate eye sits a small, clear structure called the lens, the part that helps focus light so an animal can see. In most of the body, tissue keeps changing throughout life. Cells die, new cells form, everything gets replaced over time, similar to how your skin sheds and regrows constantly. The center of the eye lens works completely differently. Once it forms before birth, its core essentially freezes in time and never gets replaced again for the rest of that animal's life. That single fact turned out to be the key that unlocked the Greenland shark's greatest secret. A marine biologist named John Stephenson first collected a piece of the shark's backbone, hoping to find growth rings hidden somewhere inside. Similar to counting rings inside tree bark, he found nothing usable. Frustrated, he brought the problem to a specialist in an entirely different scientific field, someone who studied radiocarbon dating, a method typically used by archaeologists to figure out the age of ancient bones, fossils, and artifacts dug out of the ground. That specialist suggested something nobody had tried on a Greenland shark before, testing the eye lens instead of the skeleton. Since the centre of the lens forms before birth and never changes afterward, it works almost like a sealed time capsule, permanently locked to the exact moment the animal was born, similar to a photograph that never fades or gets edited, no matter how much time passes around it. A graduate student named Julius Nielsen took on the difficult task of turning this idea into real data. For years, he tracked down Greenland sharks that had died accidentally, usually caught as unintended bycatch in fishing nets set for other species. Slowly, painstakingly, he built a collection of shark eye lenses from 28 different sharks, each one a potential key to solving the mystery. The method itself borrowed a tool more commonly used to date ancient pottery or old bones. By measuring specific chemical markers locked inside that frozen core of the eye lens, scientists could calculate roughly how many years had passed since that shark was born, similar to reading a hidden timestamp buried inside living tissue. It was a bold, unconventional idea, testing an eyeball to measure the age of one of the ocean's most mysterious predators. Nobody knew for certain if the method would even work on a species this poorly understood. But the results that came back were about to shock the entire scientific community and reveal a number so extreme that researchers had to double-check their work before they dared believe it. In the 1950s and 60s, countries around the world tested nuclear weapons above ground, releasing massive amounts of radiation into the atmosphere. Decades later, that same radioactive fallout became an unlikely tool for measuring the age of one of the ocean's oldest predators. Those nuclear tests released a surge of a specific radioactive form of carbon to the atmosphere, called carbon-14. Ocean currents and marine food chains eventually absorbed some of that carbon, spreading it into fish, plankton, and eventually into the tissue of animals like the Greenland shark. Scientists refer to this sudden spike as the bomb pulse, a clear chemical marker in nature tied to an exact moment in human history, similar to a fingerprint stamped onto the entire planet at once. Remember, the centre of a shark's eye lens locks in place before birth and never changes again. That means whatever chemical signature existed in the ocean at the exact moment a shark was born gets permanently sealed inside that lens, like a sealed time capsule buried the day that shark came into the world. Researchers studying the 28 sharks searched for that specific nuclear bomb pulse signature inside each eye lens. Here is where the story gets remarkable. Only the smallest sharks studied, the youngest ones in the group, showed any trace of that nuclear testing signature at all. Every larger, older shark showed no trace of it whatsoever. That meant every one of those bigger sharks had already been born decades, or even centuries, before nuclear testing ever began in the 1950s. Think about what that actually means. Some of these sharks were already alive, already swimming through the freezing Arctic dark before humans had even discovered how to split an atom. Before airplanes existed, before electricity lit up cities. Some may have already been alive before the United States was founded as a country. Using this bomb pulse data as a reliable anchor point, researchers built a detailed growth curve, a mathematical model connecting a shark's body size directly to its estimated age. Once they had that formula locked in, they could finally estimate the age of every shark in their collection, including the very largest, oldest individuals ever measured. The team ran the numbers again and again, wanting absolute certainty before publishing anything this extreme. Every calculation kept pointing toward the same, almost unbelievable conclusion. This was not simply an old fish. This was quite possibly the oldest living vertebrate ever documented on planet Earth, and the exact number they were about to reveal would stun marine biologists worldwide. The final calculation was ready. Julius Nielsen and his research team had built their growth curve, verified it against the nuclear bomb pulse data, and applied it to the largest shark in their collection, a massive 16-foot female pulled accidentally from fishing nets in the North Atlantic. The estimated age came back at 392 years old, with a margin of error of about 120 years in either direction. That means the true age of that single shark could reasonably fall anywhere between 272 years old and 512 years old. Even at the lowest possible number in that range, 272 years, this shark still shattered every previous longevity record held by any animal with a backbone. The species holding the previous record, the bowhead whale, tops out at roughly 211 years old. The Greenland shark blew straight past that number and kept going. Picture the low end of that range for a moment. 272 years old. A shark born around that time would have already been alive before the United States declared independence in 1776. Now picture the high end. 512 years old. A shark that old would have already been swimming through Arctic waters around the time Leonardo da Vinci was still alive, finishing paintings that hang in museums today. This discovery was not a small, quiet correction to an old estimate. It completely rewrote the record books for vertebrate longevity, instantly. Published in the scientific journal Science, the research made headlines across the entire world within days. Marine biologists everywhere had to accept a completely new upper limit for how long an animal with a backbone could possibly survive. Stephen Campana, a marine biologist unconnected to the original research, later admitted just how wide open this mystery had been before the study. It was almost unbelievable, he said, that nobody previously knew whether this shark lived to 20 years old or lived to 1,000 years old. Both extremes had genuinely been proposed by different scientists at different points. That is how little solid data existed before this breakthrough study finally arrived. Every other detail we have already covered about this shark, the freezing habitat, the barely idling metabolism, the painfully slow growth rate, suddenly clicked together perfectly, like scattered puzzle pieces finally locking into their correct places. Everything about this animal's biology had been quietly pointing toward one single, staggering conclusion the entire time. We simply lacked the right tool to prove it. But a number this extreme raises even bigger questions. What does it actually feel like to live across multiple centuries of human history? What has this shark quietly witnessed while drifting through the dark? That question takes us somewhere even stranger than the number itself. Stop and really sit with this number for a second. A living Greenland shark swimming right now in this exact moment could have already been alive when Shakespeare was still writing his plays, when the Mayflower first crossed the Atlantic Ocean, when the first steam engines were still generations away from being invented. This is not a fossil. This is not a skeleton sitting quietly in some dusty museum display case. This is a living, breathing animal, moving through freezing Arctic water at this very second, that has personally outlasted entire empires, multiple world wars, and nearly every human being who has ever lived throughout all of recorded history. Try picturing it a different way. If a Greenland shark alive today happens to be around 400 years old, it was already swimming through the ocean before the light bulb existed, before cars existed, before airplanes existed, before humans had even successfully mapped the exact shape and size of Antarctica. A human lifetime, even an unusually long and fortunate one, might reach around 100 years. That means a single Greenland shark could easily outlive 4 or 5 entire generations of the exact same human family, watching great-grandparents, grandparents, parents and children come and go, one after another, while it continues quietly drifting through the same cold, dark water the entire time. Nothing about this shark's actual daily existence has changed throughout that stretch of centuries. It has continued swimming slowly through icy, lightless water, hunting fish, scavenging carcasses, avoiding danger, generation after generation, decade after decade, century after century, while the entire surface world above it transformed completely almost beyond recognition. There is something genuinely humbling buried inside that fact. While human civilizations rose, fought devastating wars, invented entirely new technologies and eventually collapsed or evolved into something new, this same shark, or one very much like it, kept doing exactly what it has always done, moving slowly and patiently through darkness, following the exact same rhythm it always has. This raises an obvious pressing question. If Greenland sharks routinely live for multiple centuries, they clearly are not aging or breaking down anywhere near the same rate that we do. Something inside their biology, something buried deep at the cellular level, must work fundamentally differently compared to nearly every other animal alive on Earth today. Before we can properly explore that deeper biological mystery, there is one more piece of this shark's strange timeline we need to understand first, because its path to becoming an adult is every bit as extreme and every bit as slow as its overall lifespan. Picture waiting 150 years just to grow up. Not to graduate school, not to get a job, but simply to reach the point where your body is finally ready to have children. For the Greenland shark, that wait is not an exaggeration. It is simply how long growing up takes. Scientists studying the same 28 sharks used in the age breakthrough noticed something strange while examining body size alongside age estimates. Female Greenland sharks did not appear to reach sexual maturity, the point where their bodies become capable of reproducing, until they reached roughly 150 years old. Some estimates place it closer to 134 years, others as high as 156 years, but every serious estimate lands somewhere in that same extreme range. Compare that to almost any other animal you know. A dog reaches maturity within about a year. A human takes roughly 12 to 14 years. Even an elephant, one of the slowest maturing land mammals on Earth, reaches that milestone by around 10 to 15 years old. The Greenland shark blows past every single one of those numbers combined, several times over, before it is even capable of starting a family. Why would evolution build an animal this way? The answer connects directly back to everything we already know about this shark's biology. Its metabolism runs at an extremely slow, idling pace. Its growth rate crawls forward at less than an inch per year. If literally everything about this animal's body operates in slow motion, then its path toward reproduction was always going to follow that exact same unhurried rhythm. Researchers use a helpful comparison here. Imagine a savings account that only earns a tiny sliver of interest each year. It technically grows the entire time, but reaching any meaningful milestone takes an enormous, patient stretch of time. The Greenland shark's body works on that exact same principle. Slow, steady, patient progress, stretched out across a scale that dwarfs a single human lifetime. This slow timeline carries a serious real-world consequence, one that becomes extremely important later in this story. An animal that needs 150 years just to become capable of reproducing cannot recover quickly from population losses. If humans accidentally kill too many Greenland sharks through fishing before they ever reach that milestone, the entire species could struggle to bounce back for centuries, not decades. For now, simply sit with the strangeness of it. A creature that spends its first century and a half essentially still growing up, still waiting, before its adult life can properly begin. And once maturity finally does arrive, the next chapter of the Greenland shark's reproductive story turns out to be just as slow and just as extreme as everything that came before it. A human pregnancy lasts about 9 months. A Greenland shark pregnancy may last somewhere between 8 and 18 years. Read that again. Read, not 8 to 18 months, 8 to 18 years, an entire stretch of time long enough for a human baby to be born, grow up, and start middle school before a single shark pup ever arrives. Scientists still do not know the exact number with full certainty, since studying a pregnant Greenland shark in the wild is extraordinarily difficult, but every serious estimate places shark gestation, the scientific term for how long an animal carries its young before birth, somewhere within that staggering multi-year range. Once a Greenland shark finally does give birth, it does not produce just 1 or 2 pups the way many larger sharks do. Researchers believe a single female can give birth to around 10 pups at once, each one born fully formed and independent from the very first moment, roughly 16 inches long at birth. Small compared to their massive parent, but already a fully capable, miniature version of the giant they will eventually grow into. There is no parental care after that moment, no protection, no guidance, no support system waiting to help the newborn sharks survive. Each pup swims off entirely on its own, into the same freezing, lightless world its parent has survived for centuries, needing to find food and avoid danger completely alone, right from its very first day of life. Think about the sheer commitment that single reproductive cycle represents. A female shark spends around 150 years simply reaching maturity. Then she may spend up to 18 additional years pregnant with a single litter of pups. Combine those two numbers together, and a female Greenland shark could be pushing close to 170 years old before she ever successfully produces her first generation of offspring. This slow reproductive rhythm connects perfectly to everything we already understand about this species. Nothing about the Greenland shark rushes, not its swimming, not its growth, not its metabolism, and clearly not its approach to having children either. Every single piece of its biology moves according to the exact same unhurried, patient timeline. But this extended reproductive timeline also creates real, serious vulnerability. A species that takes this long to reproduce simply cannot recover quickly from losing individuals, especially individuals still years away from ever having pups of their own. We'll return to exactly why that vulnerability matters so much later in this story. For now, we turn towards something even stranger, sitting directly on this ancient shark's face, a parasite that has quietly been feeding on its eyes for years, possibly centuries, without ever fully blinding the animal it lives on. Look closely at almost any Greenland shark ever photographed, and you will likely notice something small, pale and worm-like dangling from one or both of its eyes. This is not an injury. It is a living creature, a parasite that has made this shark's eyeball its permanent home. The parasite is a type of copepod, a small crustacean related to shrimp called Omatocoita elongata. Scientists studying Greenland sharks discovered that an extremely high percentage of wild sharks carry this exact parasite attached directly to the clear surface of the eye called the cornea, using a specialized stalk that burrows in and absorbs nutrients straight from the shark's own tissue. Picture something the size of a large caterpillar, permanently latched onto your eyeball, feeding off it continuously for months, years, possibly even centuries at a time, since the Greenland shark lives so long that a single parasite could theoretically remain attached for an enormous stretch of that lifespan. As the parasite feeds, it steadily damages the surface of the eye, causing scarring, clouding, and irritation. Researchers describe the surface of an affected eye becoming opaque, similar to frosted glass replacing a clear window. In the most severe cases, the damage becomes so extensive that the eye's lens can become exposed or even pushed outward, leaving that eye essentially useless. Here is where the story takes an unexpectedly strange turn. Scientists studying this relationship discovered that Omatocoita elongata is bioluminescent, meaning it can actually produce its own glowing light, similar to a firefly lighting up on a summer night, except this one glows permanently while feeding on a shark's open eye in the pitch-black depths of the Arctic Ocean. That glowing detail led some researchers to propose a strange, almost unbelievable theory. Perhaps this parasite is not purely harmful. Perhaps its faint glow, dangling directly in front of the shark's face in total darkness, actually attracts curious fish close enough for the shark to strike, similar to an anglerfish using its own glowing lure to draw prey directly toward its mouth. That theory remains unproven and is still debated among scientists today, an unknown mystery rather than a confirmed fact. What researchers do know for certain is that these parasites do not appear to threaten the shark's overall survival. Removing one, researchers say, feels exactly like plucking a single grape off a vine, and yet, remarkably, doing so does not restore the shark's vision, since the damage to the eye tissue itself is already permanent by that point. For decades, this single parasite convinced nearly the entire scientific community that Greenland sharks were functionally blind. Blind sharks, hunting seals, in total darkness, using senses nobody had ever properly studied before. That assumption stood untested for a very long time, until an extremely recent study turned this entire piece of the story completely upside down. For years, one simple assumption shaped almost everything scientists believed about how the Greenland shark experiences the world around it. If parasites are steadily damaging its eyes, and it lives somewhere that barely has any light in the first place, then vision probably does not matter much to this animal at all. That assumption made logical sense on the surface. Down at nearly 2,000 meters, true daylight simply does not exist. Many deep-sea creatures have evolved without needing strong eyesight at all, relying instead on other specialized senses better suited to permanent darkness. Since Greenland sharks already carry eye-damaging parasites on top of living somewhere already pitch black, researchers assumed vision had become a minor, almost unnecessary sense for this particular species. So how does a shark hunt effectively while presumably blind, or close to it? Researchers began focusing much more heavily on the Greenland shark's other senses instead, and discovered some genuinely impressive tools built directly into its body. Sharks in general possess an extraordinary sense of smell, and the Greenland shark appears to be no exception. It can detect extremely faint traces of blood or decaying flesh dissolved in the water from a significant distance away, similar to how a bloodhound can track a scent trail across miles of open forest. In the pitch-black ocean, smell works perfectly well regardless of whether an animal can see anything at all. Sharks also carry a specialized sensory system called the ampullae of Lorenzini, small, gel-filled pores clustered around the head that can detect the faint electrical fields every living creature naturally generates simply by moving its muscles. Even a Greenland shark that could not see anything at all could still detect a nearby seal purely through electrical signals alone, similar to a submarine using sonar to detect other objects without any visual confirmation whatsoever. With these backup senses working well in total darkness, the assumption of a mostly blind predator seemed to explain the Greenland shark's mysterious hunting success reasonably well. A shark relying primarily on smell and electrical detection, rather than eyesight, could still track down sleeping seals or scavenge floating carcasses without any real difficulty. For years, this explanation satisfied most researchers studying the species, blind or close enough to it, compensating successfully through other finely tuned senses instead. Case closed. Mystery solved, at least for now. Except it was not actually solved. A team of scientists decided to test this long-standing assumption directly, using genetic testing, tissue samples, and detailed eye structure analysis rather than just visual inspection and educated guesswork. What they found completely upended nearly everything researchers thought they understood about how this ancient predator actually experiences its own world. In a study published in Nature Communications in January 2026, researchers set out to finally settle the debate over whether Greenland shark vision was actually as damaged as everyone assumed. Instead of simply looking at parasite damage on the surface of the eye, they examined the deeper biology underneath it, at the genetic and cellular level. Using genomic, transcriptomic, histological and functional evidence, researchers found that the Greenland shark retains an intact visual system well adapted for life in dim light. That single sentence quietly overturned years of assumptions built almost entirely around one visible, easy-to-photograph parasite. Histology and in vitro opsin expression revealed visual adaptations typical of deep-sea species, including densely packed, elongated rods and a short wavelength shift in rod visual pigment sensitivity compared to shallow water sharks. In simple terms, the actual light-detecting cells lining the back of the shark's eye appeared fully functional, specifically tuned for extremely dim conditions, not damaged or shut down the way scientists previously assumed. Think of it this way. Imagine assuming someone was completely deaf, simply because you noticed something visibly stuck in their outer ear. Then imagine a specialist finally testing their actual hearing nerve directly and discovering it still works perfectly fine underneath. That is essentially what happened here. The parasite creates real, visible damage to the outer surface of the eye, but the deeper visual system underneath appears to remain genuinely functional. This does not mean the parasite is harmless, or that the blindness reported in many individual sharks is fabricated. Severely affected eyes can absolutely become impaired or even lose function entirely in some cases. What changes is the bigger overall picture. Vision may still play a real active role in how at least some Greenland sharks navigate and hunt through the deep, rather than being a completely useless, abandoned sense across the entire species. This discovery matters far beyond simply correcting one small detail about shark eyeballs. It reveals something important about scientific research itself. An assumption that felt completely logical and stood essentially unquestioned for years still required direct testing before anyone could actually call it a proven, confirmed fact rather than an educated guess. For the Greenland shark specifically, this means its senses may work more like a finely tuned toolkit than researchers previously realized. Sharp smell, sensitive electrical detection, and quite possibly still functional vision, all working together simultaneously in the crushing darkness of the deep. A shark that was supposedly relying on backup senses out of pure necessity may actually be running multiple advanced systems at once, layered together for maximum effectiveness. With that picture becoming clearer, one obvious question remains. If this shark can sense the world around it this effectively, what exactly has it been finding and eating down there in the dark? The answer to that question turns out to be one of the strangest parts of this entire story. Somewhere in the freezing darkness, a dead whale sinks slowly toward the ocean floor. Miles away, a Greenland shark shifts direction, drawn steadily toward a scent trail invisible to nearly every other sense on Earth, except smell. This is not guesswork. This is one of the sharpest tracking systems found anywhere in the animal kingdom. Sharks as a group are famous among scientists for extraordinary smelling ability, and the Greenland shark appears to rely on this sense especially heavily. Given how much of its life unfolds somewhere true, eyesight has limited use most of the time. Specialized structures inside its snout can detect chemical traces dissolved directly into the surrounding seawater, sometimes described as being sensitive enough to detect a single drop of blood diluted across an area roughly comparable to a large swimming pool. Picture standing at one end of a football field while someone opens a bottle of perfume at the opposite end, and somehow still catching the exact scent almost immediately. That comparison actually understates how sensitive a shark's sense of smell truly is. In freezing water that carries scent particles efficiently across long distances, this ability becomes an incredibly powerful hunting tool, especially for locating already dead or injured animals drifting somewhere nearby in the dark. Beyond smell, sharks also carry that specialized electrical detection system mentioned earlier, the ampullae of Lorenzini. These small, jelly-filled pores cluster densely around the shark's snout and head, capable of detecting incredibly faint electrical fields so small they are literally generated just from a heartbeat or a muscle twitching somewhere nearby in the water. Every living creature generates a small natural electrical field simply by being alive, the same way your own heart generates a measurable electrical signal a doctor can detect using a machine at a hospital. A sleeping seal floating quietly at the surface still generates that faint signal, even while remaining completely motionless and silent. For a shark equipped with electrical detection, that seal might as well be lit up and glowing brightly, fully visible despite total darkness surrounding it on every side. Combine an exceptional sense of smell with sensitive electrical detection, and possibly still functional vision layered on top of both, and a very different picture starts to emerge. This is not a crude, half-blind predator stumbling clumsily through the dark by pure accident. This is a highly specialized hunting system, built from multiple overlapping senses working together simultaneously, each one perfectly adapted for an environment where light simply does not exist. These combined senses explain how a shark this slow, this ancient, manages to consistently locate food across an empty, freezing, pitch-black ocean. But knowing how it finds food only leads to an even stranger question. What is this shark actually eating down there? The answer, pulled directly from decades of stomach content research, turns out to be far stranger and far more unsettling than anyone initially expected. Marine biologists cutting open Greenland shark stomachs for research have documented an almost unbelievable range of items pulled out over the decades. Fish are expected, squid makes sense. But researchers have also documented remains from horses, dogs, moose, and even large marine mammals, a list far stranger than anything typically found inside an ordinary shark. There is much evidence to show that Greenland sharks will eat just about any carrion they encounter, and all manner of fish have been found in their stomachs along with the remains of whales, seals, dogs, horses, reindeer, moose, and polar bears. Read that list again slowly. Horses, moose, polar bears. These are not typical ocean-dwelling animals, which raises an obvious and fascinating question. How exactly did they end up inside a shark's stomach in the first place? Researchers studying the Greenland shark's actual diet across different regions found a more grounded, everyday pattern underneath those strange headline-grabbing discoveries. Using stomach content data and stable isotope analysis, scientists found that the smallest Greenland sharks tend to feed mainly on lower-level prey like squid, while larger sharks mainly feed on higher-level prey such as seals, along with a wide range of bottom-dwelling fish including cod, skates, flounders, wolffish, and redfish. A separate detailed study conducted in the Arctic waters around Svalbard, Norway added even more useful detail to this picture. Researchers examined the digestive tracts of 45 Greenland sharks, and seal tissue turned up in roughly 36% of the stomachs containing food, while whale tissue appeared in about 18%. Fish still dominated the overall diet, with Atlantic cod, Atlantic wolffish, and haddock ranking as the most commonly found species. So where do horses, moose, and polar bears actually fit into this picture. The most likely explanation connects directly back to the Greenland shark's role as an opportunistic scavenger, an animal willing to eat essentially anything it happens to find already dead and sinking through the water column. Land mammals such as reindeer, caribou or muskoxen that wash ashore and eventually drift out to sea have also turned up inside Greenland shark stomachs, suggesting these sharks readily scavenge carcasses that happen to reach the ocean. Picture an animal falling through thin ice, or a carcass washing out into a river that eventually empties into the sea. Once that body sinks deep enough, it drifts directly into Greenland shark territory, and an opportunistic scavenger with an extraordinary sense of smell is not going to pass up an easy, effortless meal, regardless of how strange or unexpected that meal might originally look on land. This pattern reveals something important about how this ancient predator actually survives for centuries in such a harsh, unpredictable environment. It cannot afford to be a picky eater. Living for hundreds of years on a slow, idling metabolism means grabbing calories wherever they happen to appear, whether that means an ordinary cod, a seal caught by surprise, or the drifting remains of a moose that never should have ended up anywhere near the ocean in the first place. One particular story out of all these stomach discoveries stands out from every other one on record. An intact land animal found inside a shark, antlers and all, so complete and so strange that it deserves its own part entirely to properly explain. Fishermen hauling in a Greenland shark once made a discovery so strange that the story still gets repeated by marine biologists today. Inside the shark's stomach they found a reindeer, not scattered pieces, not a few chewed bones, a nearly complete reindeer, antlers and all, somehow crammed inside the stomach of an animal that spends its entire life underwater. Greenland sharks have often been found to have the remnants of polar bears, horses, and reindeer in their stomachs, and one individual was once caught with a completely intact reindeer, antlers included inside its belly. Picture the size of a full-grown reindeer, antlers spreading out wider than a person's outstretched arms, somehow fitting entirely inside the digestive system of a single shark. How does something like this even happen? Reindeer do not belong in the ocean. They live on land, migrating across frozen tundra, occasionally crossing rivers, lakes, or narrow stretches of coastal water during seasonal migration. Every so often, that crossing goes wrong. A reindeer breaks through thin ice, gets caught in a strong current, or simply cannot make it across a channel of open water, separating one piece of land from another. Reindeer remains have been found inside Greenland sharks, and reputable accounts from biologists suggest these sharks may sometimes opportunistically target caribou swimming across seawater channels and straits, similar to how a crocodile ambushes prey crossing a river. That comparison paints a genuinely striking picture. A massive, patient predator waiting silently beneath a migration route, ready to take advantage of any animal forced into open water. Whether that specific reindeer was actively hunted mid-swim, or simply drowned first and sank down into shark territory afterward, remains impossible to know for certain, an unknown detail lost the moment the story became simply a discovery inside a fisherman's net. Either scenario fits perfectly with everything we already understand about this shark's opportunistic, patient nature. What makes this discovery so important goes beyond simple shock value. It proves, in dramatic and undeniable fashion, exactly how far this shark's diet actually stretches once it moves beyond typical fish and seals. This is not a picky specialist feeding only in narrow, predictable patterns. This is a true generalist, willing and physically able to swallow almost anything it encounters, provided that meal fits inside its mouth and stomach. That same jaw structure we described earlier, capable of rotating in a tight circle and slicing clean, round plugs of flesh from much larger bodies, likely plays a critical role here as well, allowing the shark to break down oversized prey piece by piece, rather than needing to swallow everything whole in one single motion. A shark capable of digesting an entire reindeer raises an obvious next question. If it can handle prey this large and unusual, what happens when it turns its attention towards something even bigger and far more dangerous, the largest land predator walking anywhere on Earth? Somewhere beneath the Arctic ice, a polar bear's body sinks slowly into darkness. Nothing alive should be able to challenge an animal that stands at the very top of its entire ecosystem, feared by nearly everything else that shares its frozen world. Yet Greenland shark stomachs have turned up polar bear remains more than once, forcing scientists to ask an uncomfortable question that still does not have a fully confirmed answer. Individual Greenland shark stomachs have been found to contain an entire reindeer, parts of a horse, and even a polar bear, the largest land predator on Earth. A polar bear inside a shark's stomach sounds almost impossible to believe at first. This is an animal capable of killing seals and even occasionally challenging orcas, sitting near the very top of the entire Arctic food chain. So did this shark actually kill a polar bear, or simply happen to find one already dead? Marine biologists studying this exact question admit that remains of polar bears and reindeer have turned up inside Greenland shark stomachs, but nobody yet knows for certain whether the shark actively hunted them or scavenged their bodies after they had already died from other causes. This uncertainty sits right at the centre of one of the biggest ongoing debates surrounding this entire species. Is the Greenland shark primarily a scavenger, patiently cleaning up carcasses that happen to drift down from above, or is it also an active, capable predator, occasionally taking down prey that seems, at least on the surface, far too fast or too dangerous for such a slow-moving animal to realistically catch? The honest answer researchers currently give is both, depending on the specific situation and specific prey involved. Polar bears sometimes drown while swimming unusually long distances between shrinking ice floes, a growing problem as Arctic sea ice continues melting and shifting. A drowned bear sinking toward the ocean floor becomes an enormous calorie-rich meal for any patient scavenger drifting nearby, especially one built to survive for centuries by never turning down an easy opportunity. At the very same time, we already know this shark shows clear evidence of active predatory behaviour in other documented situations, ambushing sleeping seals, and possibly even targeting reindeer forced into open water during seasonal migration crossings. An animal already capable of both behaviours could plausibly manage either scenario with a polar bear as well, depending on rare and specific circumstances that scientists have not yet directly observed and confirmed firsthand. This mystery remains genuinely unresolved. Nobody has yet captured direct video evidence of a Greenland shark actively attacking a live polar bear. Until someone does, this particular question stays exactly where it currently sits, a fascinating, unconfirmed possibility rather than a proven, documented fact. What we do have clear evidence for is the seal hunting behaviour mentioned earlier, and that story deserves a much closer, more detailed look, because the exact method this slow-moving shark uses to catch one of the fastest swimmers in the Arctic reveals something remarkable about its actual hunting strategy. A ringed seal drifts near the surface, resting quietly after a long stretch of active swimming. It appears completely safe, floating peacefully in open water far from any obvious threat. Below, almost invisible in the darkness, a massive shape begins drifting upward, slow, patient, and almost silent. We already established that a Greenland shark's typical swimming speed sits far below that of a healthy alert seal. On paper, this predator should never manage to catch this particular prey. Yet stomach content studies across multiple regions consistently show seal remains showing up again and again, and in some cases, showing clear signs the seal had still been alive and warm at the moment it was consumed. The likely explanation connects directly back to seal behaviour itself. Seals in Arctic waters sometimes rest by floating motionless at the surface, a behaviour some researchers believe may have originally evolved as protection against exhausted polar bear ambush attacks launched from solid ice nearby. That same resting strategy, unfortunately for the seal, creates a perfect, undefended opportunity for a slow, patient predator approaching quietly from directly underneath. With a top recorded average speed far below that of a typical seal, it seems unlikely that the Greenland shark actively chases seals down in open water, and researchers have suggested instead that these sharks may act primarily as scavengers, or possibly ambush seals while they are sleeping. A resting, unaware seal effectively erases the shark's biggest natural disadvantage, its lack of raw speed, by removing the need for any high-speed chase in the first place. There is more supporting evidence for genuine active hunting beyond simple ambush timing. Stomach temperature readings taken from captured sharks have revealed unusual warm spikes, suggesting some prey items were still warm, and therefore likely caught and consumed while genuinely alive, rather than already dead and scavenged from the seafloor. We also cannot forget that earlier detail about sudden explosive bursts of speed. Divers and researchers working directly with unrestrained sharks have documented quick, powerful acceleration far exceeding the shark's normal lazy drift, similar to a parked car suddenly slamming its accelerator down for just a few crucial seconds. A final, sudden lunge covering only a short distance would not require sustained high speed at all, only enough force to close a short gap before an unsuspecting seal has any real chance to react and escape. Combine patient ambush positioning, precise timing based on resting prey behaviour, and a sudden explosive final strike, and an image emerges of a far more capable, far more dangerous predator than its sluggish, lazy reputation initially suggests. This is not a slow, harmless scavenger stumbling accidentally into an occasional easy meal. This is a calculated hunter, perfectly built around patience rather than raw speed. Everything this shark eats eventually ends up processed inside a body already packed full of unusual defensive chemicals. Chemicals so powerful that they create one of the strangest and most dangerous secrets connected to this entire species. A secret that becomes deadly the moment any other creature, including a human, tries eating this shark's own flesh. Cut into fresh Greenland shark meat, cook it up, and take a single bite, and within a short while you might start stumbling, slurring your speech, and losing your balance entirely, symptoms that look almost identical to severe alcohol intoxication. This is not folklore or exaggeration. Fresh Greenland shark flesh is genuinely, scientifically toxic to both humans and animals. We already touched on this briefly. That unusually high concentration of urea and a compound called trimethylamine oxide packed throughout the shark's tissue, chemicals that help protect its cells against the brutal combination of crushing pressure and freezing cold found deep in the Arctic Ocean. What we have not yet fully explored is exactly how dangerous these same protective chemicals become once that meat gets eaten by something else. Research studying poisoning cases connected to Greenland shark meat found that the flesh, especially in fresh condition, is toxic to both dogs and humans, with laboratory analysis revealing large amounts of trimethylamine oxide as the likely responsible compound. The resulting symptoms appear to come from acute trimethylamine poisoning, caused when that trimethylamine oxide gets converted inside the digestive system into a related, more dangerous compound called trimethylamine. Picture your own liver working like a filter, constantly cleaning small amounts of naturally occurring waste compounds out of your bloodstream without any issue at all. In small amounts, your liver can safely convert this dangerous compound back into a harmless form and clear it from your body. But the sheer volume of trimethylamine oxide packed inside Greenland shark meat can completely overwhelm that natural filtering system. The resulting symptoms have earned a blunt nickname among people living in Iceland and Greenland: shark drunk. Eating fresh Greenland shark meat can cause symptoms strongly resembling severe drunkenness, including confusion, nausea, and stumbling, and in extreme concentrated cases, convulsions. Dogs that accidentally eat this meat reportedly display similar staggering, disoriented behaviour almost immediately afterward. This creates a genuinely strange evolutionary puzzle. The exact same chemical adaptation that allows this shark to survive centuries in crushing, freezing Arctic depths also makes its own body actively dangerous for almost anything else that tries eating it once it dies, including humans who might otherwise view a 24-foot shark as an enormous, tempting source of food and calories washed up along the shore. For centuries, people living across Iceland and Greenland encountered this problem directly, likely the hard way, through accidental poisoning after eating shark meat pulled from washed-up carcasses or accidental catches. Rather than simply avoiding this massive source of food entirely, they eventually discovered something remarkable, a very specific process that could strip away the danger completely, transforming a genuinely poisonous animal into a bizarre, celebrated cultural delicacy still eaten proudly today. Imagine finding a massive 24-foot shark washed up along a rocky Arctic shoreline, an enormous amount of meat just sitting there, seemingly free for the taking. Early settlers across Iceland and Greenland faced exactly this tempting scenario, and initial attempts to simply eat that meat fresh reportedly went very badly, very quickly. We already know the basic chemistry driving this danger. extremely high concentrations of trimethylamine oxide throughout the shark's tissue, converting inside a person's digestive system into trimethylamine, a compound capable of causing serious, sometimes severe neurological symptoms. But what does that poisoning actually look like in practice, moment by moment? Fresh Greenland shark meat is genuinely pharmacologically dangerous rather than simply unpleasant tasting, and eating it can cause symptoms resembling extreme drunkenness, including vomiting, disorientation, and muscle convulsions, with large enough quantities potentially proving fatal. This is not a mild stomachache or simple food poisoning. This is a direct, measurable chemical attack on the nervous system itself. Cooking the meat thoroughly helps somewhat, breaking down a portion of these dangerous compounds through heat, but heat alone cannot fully neutralize the underlying problem. While cooking can help reduce urea concentration to some extent, it is not sufficient to fully eliminate every toxin from Greenland shark meat, and the traditional curing and fermentation process remains necessary to properly break down and remove both the urea and trimethylamine oxide. Even boiling, one of the most reliable cooking methods for killing dangerous bacteria in typical food preparation, does not solve this particular problem. Boiling alone may reduce toxicity somewhat, but it does not replicate the complex biochemical transformation that fermentation achieves. This left early Icelandic and Greenlandic communities facing a genuinely difficult choice. Walk away from an enormous, valuable source of food and protein sitting right in front of them, or find some other, more effective method capable of neutralizing a powerful natural poison built directly into the animal's own flesh. Rather than simply giving up on this massive available food source, they eventually developed something remarkable through generations of careful trial and error. A slow, deliberate process capable of transforming genuinely poisonous shark meat into something safe enough to eat, and eventually into a proud, celebrated part of their national food culture, still served with pride today. Somewhere along a windswept Icelandic coastline, a pit gets dug directly into loose gravel and sand. Freshly cut Greenland shark meat gets buried inside, covered over, and left completely undisturbed for weeks. This unusual patient process transforms a genuinely poisonous animal into hakal, a traditional dish many Icelanders still eat proudly today. The traditional method begins with gutting and beheading the shark, then placing the meat into a shallow hole dug in gravelly sand, with the cleaned cavity resting on a small mound of sand, before covering the shark with additional sand and gravel and placing stones on top to help press fluid steadily out of the body. The shark then ferments this way for 6 to 12 weeks, depending on the specific season. What exactly happens chemically during all that time buried underground? During fermentation, trimethylamine N-oxide levels decrease steadily until dropping completely below detectable limits within about 5 weeks, while the meat's pH level rises from roughly 6 up to about 9, and at the same time, trimethylamine and a related compound called dimethylamine increase significantly. In simpler terms, that dangerous chemical compound responsible for shark drunk poisoning symptoms gradually breaks down and effectively disappears from the meat over time, while a natural fermentation process driven by bacteria transforms the meat's overall chemistry into something the human body can finally handle safely, similar to how properly fermenting certain vegetables transforms them into something entirely different from their raw, original form. After several weeks buried underground fermenting, the meat gets dug back up and hung outside to dry for several additional months. After digging the pieces back up, they would hang the meat so it could age even further, and the final result is pungent hakal, a dish both loved and hated in equal measure by Icelanders today. The finished product carries an intense, unmistakable smell, often compared directly to strong ammonia. The characteristic ammonia smell comes from urea in the shark flesh breaking down into ammonia throughout the curing process, and while most of that ammonia eventually dissipates across those many months of preparation, a persistent remainder still creates that famously strong, sharp aroma. Today, hakal holds a genuinely respected place within Icelandic food culture, often served in small cubes alongside a strong local liquor, particularly during midwinter festival celebrations. Today, it remains a genuine cultural staple in Iceland, especially during the midwinter festival known as Þorrablót, and continues to serve as a notorious adventurous challenge for curious tourists willing to try it. Think about what this tradition actually represents. Countless generations of careful trial, dangerous error, and patient observation, all eventually transforming one of the most poisonous animals in the entire ocean into a safe, celebrated national dish. But the very same slow, patient chemistry that makes this transformation necessary connects directly back to something far bigger and far more scientifically important, hidden deep inside this shark's own genetic code. Every living thing carries a complete genetic instruction manual packed inside nearly every cell of its body, called a genome. Human genomes contain roughly 3 billion individual genetic letters. When scientists finally managed to fully sequence the Greenland shark's complete genome for the first time, the resulting number was almost twice that size. The international research team's initial genome assembly, published on the bioRxiv preprint server in September 2024, comprised approximately 6.45 billion DNA base pairs, roughly twice the size of the human genome, and ranks among the largest non-tetrapod genomes ever fully sequenced. Picture your own body's complete genetic instruction manual as a massive library filled with 3 billion individual pages of written information. Now imagine an entirely different library, holding the exact same basic type of information, except stretching across nearly 6.5 billion pages instead, more than double the length, packed with content scientists are still working to fully read and properly understand today. This research project, led by scientist Arne Sam at Ruhr University Bochum in Germany, brought together collaborators from the Leibniz Institute on Aging in Jena, the University of Copenhagen, the Scuola Normale Superiore in Pisa, and several additional research institutions working together toward the same shared scientific goal. This was not a small, isolated project. It required a genuinely massive, coordinated international collaboration. Why would scientists dedicate this much time, effort, and resources toward fully mapping out a shark's complete genetic code? The Greenland shark represents something genuinely rare and scientifically valuable, a living creature that has already proven it can somehow survive for multiple centuries without suffering the same severe physical breakdown that eventually catches up with nearly every other animal on Earth. If researchers could pinpoint exactly which specific genes or which particular genetic patterns allow this shark to survive this incredibly long, that discovery could open an entirely new scientific window into understanding aging itself, not just in sharks, but potentially across the entire animal kingdom, including humans. This single motivation is exactly why so many different research institutions eagerly joined forces on this single unified project in the first place. A genome this massive obviously does not explain longevity all by itself. Simple genetic size alone does not automatically translate into a longer lifespan. The real, meaningful answer had to be hiding somewhere deep inside those billions of genetic letters, specific patterns repeating over and over, patterns researchers were determined to properly identify and fully understand. What they eventually found turned out to be genuinely remarkable, and it centered specifically around how this shark's body handles and repairs damage at the cellular level. Every single day, the DNA inside your own cells suffers damage, tiny breaks and errors that accumulate steadily over time, similar to how a copy machine gradually loses image quality after making thousands and thousands of repeated copies. Your body constantly works to repair this ongoing damage using specialized DNA repair genes. The Greenland shark appears to have taken this same basic repair system and multiplied it to an almost unbelievable extreme. According to the research team's September 2024 findings, researchers identified 81 duplicated DNA repair genes within the Greenland shark's genome, genes that exist as only single copies in every other shark species examined so far, but appear as multiple duplicated copies specifically within Somniosus microcephalus. Picture a fire department responsible for protecting an entire city from fires. Most cities operate with one single standard-sized fire department handling that responsibility. The Greenland shark's body appears to operate with 81 separate, fully staffed fire departments, all covering that exact same city simultaneously, each one ready and available to respond to damage the very instant it happens, anywhere inside the body. Living up to 400 years probably has a great deal to do with genuinely superior DNA repair mechanisms, and while estimating a wild species' true maximum lifespan remains inherently challenging, Greenland sharks are generally thought to live somewhere around 400 years, give or take roughly a full century in either direction. Why would having extra, duplicated copies of these particular genes matter so much for extending lifespan? The research team hypothesizes that the shark's apparently superior DNA repairability may connect directly to an abundance of retrotransposons found throughout its genome, and since these retrotransposons can themselves cause double-strand DNA breaks, their ongoing activity may have driven the evolution of highly efficient repair mechanisms, essentially through a kind of internal evolutionary arms race. Think of retrotransposons as small, disruptive troublemakers constantly moving around inside the genome, occasionally causing accidental damage simply through their own movement and activity. If a species happens to carry an unusually large number of these genetic troublemakers, that species would also need correspondingly powerful repair systems just to keep pace and prevent that ongoing damage from steadily accumulating and eventually causing serious harm over time. This discovery offers a genuinely compelling explanation for how the Greenland shark's cells might successfully avoid the kind of slow, steady genetic breakdown that eventually catches up with most other long-lived animals. More repair capacity, working continuously and consistently across multiple centuries, could very plausibly translate directly into a dramatically longer, healthier overall lifespan. But 81 duplicated repair genes were not the only remarkable genetic discovery buried inside this shark's massive genome. Researchers also found something else entirely, a single, extremely rare change hidden inside one of the most important, most closely studied genes found in the entire animal kingdom. Deep inside nearly every living vertebrate's genome sits a single gene so important to overall survival that scientists have nicknamed it the guardian of the genome. That gene is called TP53, and it plays a critical role in suppressing tumours and coordinating how the body responds to serious genetic damage. Inside the Greenland shark, researchers discovered something about this exact gene that exists nowhere else across the entire shark family tree. Researchers examined the TP53 coding sequence closely and detected a specific amino acid insertion within the highly conserved C-terminal region of the protein, where the Greenland shark's version of this protein contains 3 adjacent lysines in a row. Every other elasmobranch species examined for comparison, meaning every other shark and ray studied, instead carries only 2 adjacent lysines at that exact same genetic location. That difference might sound small, 1 extra amino acid tucked inside one single protein. Its true significance comes from just how extraordinarily rare a change like this actually is. With the sole exception of the Greenland shark, this same 2 lysine pattern has remained completely unchanged and conserved for at least approximately 240 million years, dating back to the last common ancestor shared by all of these related elasmobranch species. Picture a sentence copied by hand, letter for letter, across 240 million individual copies made one after another, with every single copy staying completely identical throughout that entire span, except for one solitary copy where a single word suddenly, permanently changed, and then stayed changed from that exact point forward. That is roughly how rare and how significant this particular genetic alteration truly is. What does this specific change actually do to the protein itself? Those findings, originally published in a preprint paper in September 2024, suggest the Greenland shark's altered TP53 gene may play a meaningful role in the species' remarkable longevity, though researchers agree that more direct research is still genuinely needed before anyone can say that connection for certain. Using an artificial intelligence model to predict the resulting protein's 3-dimensional structure, researchers found that this specific mutation could plausibly impact how the p53 protein folds and how effectively it ultimately handles DNA repair, possibly contributing directly to a meaningfully longer overall lifespan. Importantly, this discovery remains a prediction rather than a fully proven confirmed fact. A researcher involved in the project noted that these results represent predictions only, and properly understanding the true functional effect of this specific alteration would require further laboratory testing directly inside living cells. Even as an unconfirmed possibility rather than a settled fact, this discovery connects perfectly with everything else we already know about this remarkable shark, 81 duplicated repair genes working alongside one uniquely altered guardian gene, together forming a genetic toolkit that appears specifically built for surviving centuries of accumulated cellular damage without ever fully breaking down. This exact same genetic combination may also help explain another strange related mystery: why this ancient predator appears to almost completely avoid a disease that eventually threatens nearly every other large, long-lived animal on the planet. Cancer develops when damaged cells inside the body begin dividing and multiplying uncontrollably, ignoring the normal biological signals that should otherwise stop that runaway growth process. Logically, an animal living for multiple centuries should face an absolutely enormous cumulative cancer risk, simply due to sheer accumulated time alone, offering damaged cells countless additional opportunities across hundreds of years to eventually spiral out of control. Yet sharks in general, and the Greenland shark specifically, appear strikingly resistant to this particular disease. This connects directly back to that guardian gene we just explored, TP53. Researchers found that Greenland sharks carry an altered version of the TP53 gene, which normally helps suppress tumour growth and repair damaged DNA throughout the body, and this discovery may help explain why these particular sharks so rarely develop cancer despite their extraordinarily long lifespans. Think about what TP53 actually does inside a normal healthy cell. It constantly monitors for serious genetic damage, and if that damage grows too severe to safely repair, it can trigger that specific damaged cell to self-destruct entirely, rather than risk allowing it to grow further and potentially spiral into a dangerous cancerous tumour. A more effective, more powerful version of this exact protein could plausibly provide dramatically stronger, more reliable cancer protection across an entire multi-century lifespan. This same basic longevity puzzle extends well beyond sharks alone. A professor studying different long-lived species pointed out that evolution does not always follow the exact same genetic path toward the same biological outcome. So if the underlying evolutionary goal is achieving better DNA repair, different species can potentially reach that same outcome through entirely different genetic mechanisms. Sharks, naked mole rats, and whales may each be solving the exact same fundamental biological problem in their own unique way. Naked mole rats, for example, represent another well-known example of a small mammal that lives an unusually long life while showing remarkable natural resistance to cancer. Whales, despite carrying an enormous number of individual cells throughout their massive bodies and therefore facing a correspondingly higher theoretical cancer risk from simple statistical probability alone, also show surprisingly low cancer rates overall. Each of these very different species appears to have independently evolved its own unique genetic solution toward that same basic underlying survival challenge. The keys to understanding a Greenland shark's remarkably long life can genuinely help scientists better understand longevity across other animal species as well, and could eventually prove beneficial for humans too, though researchers caution this discovery will not directly hand humans a literal fountain of youth. Sharks remain evolutionarily quite distant from humans, and our underlying biological systems differ in fundamental ways, so scientists cannot simply copy this exact genetic solution directly over into human biology. Instead, this discovery adds one more valuable, detailed piece toward a much larger ongoing scientific puzzle, patiently studying and comparing genetic data collected from many different long-lived species scattered across the planet, searching for shared underlying patterns that might eventually help explain, and perhaps someday even influence, the biological process of aging itself. Understanding this shark's genetic code required cutting-edge modern laboratory technology, working directly with tissue samples, but actually studying this same shark alive, out in its natural freezing habitat, required an entirely different kind of technological breakthrough, one focused specifically on tracking an enormous elusive predator across thousands of miles of frozen, largely unexplored ocean. Tracking a fast-moving animal like a bird or a deer across land is difficult enough on its own. Now imagine trying to track an animal that spends its entire life nearly 2,000 meters underwater, in a location so remote and difficult to access that catching even a single individual shark for research purposes can take researchers several hours of patient, dedicated effort. Researchers studying Greenland sharks in Swedish waters have started tracking these threatened deep-sea sharks, living at depths exceeding 600 meters in the Skagerrak Sea, marking the very first time researchers have successfully tracked this species specifically within Swedish territorial waters. Actually catching a shark for tagging purposes proves to be an enormous logistical challenge all on its own. Researchers rely heavily on experienced fishing teams to successfully catch these sharks, and during the entire tagging procedure, each shark gets handled as gently as physically possible, kept fully underwater at all times, with soft ropes used carefully to help safely position the shark directly alongside the boat. Once a tracking tag gets successfully attached, it can reveal genuinely fascinating details about how this shark actually moves and behaves out in its natural habitat, information researchers previously had no reliable way to directly observe or properly measure. A recent multi-year acoustic tracking study used 7 full years of telemetry data to examine the movements of 155 different Greenland sharks tagged across 6 separate coastal locations throughout Baffin Bay, and found that these sharks exhibited transient movements throughout both coastal and offshore regions, along with some clear evidence of seasonally recurring hotspots. Despite their generally slow, unhurried pace most of the time, Greenland sharks have proven fully capable of short, sudden bursts of acceleration, and researchers conducting hands-on tagging operations directly with unrestrained sharks have personally observed burst swimming speeds approaching roughly 1 meter per second, noticeably faster than the shark's normal, everyday cruising speed. Why does any of this tracking data actually matter beyond simple scientific curiosity? Understanding exactly where these sharks travel, and precisely when they travel there, helps researchers identify specific locations and times where these already vulnerable, slow, reproducing sharks might face the greatest overlap and risk from accidental commercial fishing activity. Since Greenland sharks reproduce so incredibly slowly, protecting them effectively requires genuinely knowing, with real confidence, exactly where they actually go. Every single tag successfully attached to a Greenland shark adds one more small, valuable piece toward a much larger, still developing puzzle, the actual real-world life of an animal that has managed to stay almost completely hidden from direct scientific observation for nearly the entirety of recorded human history. And one specific behaviour these modern tracking tags have managed to reveal in remarkable, precise detail involves exactly how deep and exactly how often this shark travels straight down into the crushing darkness below. A shark disappears from view, slowly sinking straight down through darkening water, heading toward a depth roughly 5 times deeper than most commercial submarines are even rated to safely travel. This is a completely normal, everyday moment for the Greenland shark, an animal that treats crushing, extreme depth as nothing more than routine. Among all currently known shark species, the Greenland shark likely swims the deepest overall, with some scientific estimates suggesting it regularly reaches depths beyond 2,000 meters below the ocean's surface. To put that number into a clearer, more relatable perspective, that depth is roughly 7 times taller than the Empire State Building, stacked completely upside down and dropped straight down into the ocean. Tracking tags have revealed fascinating detailed patterns hidden inside these deep repeated dives. High-resolution data collected from one recovered tracking tag showed a shark ascending from a deep dive in 2 sharply distinct phases, moving first quickly and then noticeably slower. An analysis comparing this exact dive pattern against dissolved oxygen data in the surrounding water suggested the shark may have ascended rapidly specifically to escape from low oxygen conditions found deeper down. This detail reveals something genuinely important about how these sharks actively navigate their underwater environment. They do not simply drift passively at random, going wherever ocean currents happen to carry them, while the vast majority of vertical movements recorded stayed within the upper mixed layer of water. Deeper dives ranging between 200 and 800 meters occurred roughly once every 3 days on average. Why would a shark deliberately choose to repeatedly dive this deep in the first place, especially given how much additional pressure and cold it must endure each time? Several different theories exist to help explain this recurring behaviour, an unknown area still being actively studied and debated by researchers today. Some scientists suspect these deep dives connect directly to actively hunting specific prey species that themselves prefer living at those exact same crushing depths. Others believe these repeated dives may relate closely to avoiding predators, regulating internal body temperature, or possibly even connect somehow to natural reproductive behaviour patterns still being researched and understood. What tracking data makes completely clear is that this shark treats extreme, crushing depth as a completely normal, everyday part of its regular life, not some rare, unusual event happening only under desperate emergency circumstances. Diving to 2,000 metres, then patiently rising back upward again, appears to be a routine, everyday commute for this animal, similar to how a person might casually commute back and forth to work each morning without giving that journey a second thought. This remarkable ability to comfortably move between wildly different depths, pressures, and temperature zones adds yet another impressive item to this shark's already long-growing list of extreme survival adaptations. But this raises an obvious, important question. If this animal has been quietly doing exactly this for literally centuries at a time, what portions of dramatic, sweeping human history has it actually swum straight through without any of us even realizing it was there the entire time? Somewhere below the freezing Arctic surface, a Greenland shark continues its same slow, patient migration pattern exactly as it has for longer than any human civilization currently standing today has existed in its current form. This is not simple exaggeration or dramatic license, it is a direct, measurable consequence of everything this shark's biology has already revealed to researchers. Think carefully back through everything we've already learned. A shark alive today could realistically have been born sometime between the years 1500 and 1700. That specific stretch of time includes the Renaissance, the entire age of global sailing exploration, and the earliest permanent European settlements established across North America. While human explorers were still actively mapping unfamiliar unknown coastlines using nothing more advanced than paper charts and a compass, a Greenland shark exactly like the ones alive today was already drifting slowly through those exact same freezing Arctic waters, following essentially the same unchanging daily and seasonal patterns it still follows right now, in the present day. While devastating global conflicts reshaped national borders, while entirely new technologies like electricity and modern airplanes transformed human civilization almost beyond recognition, this same shark, or one genuinely very much like it, continued doing exactly what it has always done, hunting patiently, scavenging opportunistically and drifting steadily through those same permanently dark, permanently freezing depths. This staggering timeline forces an important and uncomfortable realization. Humans have only actually known this specific animal even existed for a relatively brief window of that entire multi-century stretch. For the overwhelming majority of this individual shark's own personal lifetime, human beings had absolutely no confirmed scientific knowledge whatsoever that a creature capable of surviving this long could even exist anywhere on the planet. That fact alone reveals something genuinely important about the deep ocean itself as an overall environment. It remains one of the very last truly unexplored frontiers left anywhere on planet Earth, a place vast enough and difficult enough for humans to physically access, that an animal capable of quietly outliving every single human civilization currently in existence today could remain almost completely hidden from serious scientific attention until shockingly, remarkably recently. A shark alive right now, drifting quietly through the freezing dark at this very moment, was already swimming long before your country, your language, and quite possibly your entire cultural identity, as we currently understand and define it, even existed in any recognizable form. That is not simply a dramatic or poetic statement. Based on everything solid, verified science currently tells us, it is very likely a straightforward, verifiable fact. Given a lifespan this genuinely extreme, an obvious and important question naturally follows. How did humans somehow manage to completely miss discovering something this remarkable for so incredibly long, especially in an increasingly modern, highly connected, well-studied world? For most of documented human history, the Greenland shark existed almost entirely at the very edge of human awareness, a strange, occasional catch tangled inside fishing nets, quickly discarded and mostly forgotten, rather than a subject anyone considered worthy of serious, dedicated scientific study. Why did this particular species manage to stay so completely hidden for such an unusually long stretch of time, especially compared to other large, well-known ocean predators like the great white shark? The answer comes down to a combination of extreme depth, brutal cold, and remote, difficult-to-access location, three separate factors that together created what amounted to nearly the perfect natural hiding place. Carbon dating methods can only ever provide reasonable estimates rather than one single, perfectly definitive age for any individual shark, and scientists continue actively working to refine and improve this exact method, hoping to eventually produce even more precise, more accurate measurements sometime in the future. Even now, after major groundbreaking scientific discoveries, significant uncertainty still genuinely remains surrounding many basic aspects of this species. Beneath the frigid, tempestuous waters of the North Atlantic Ocean lurks a genuine giant, a deeply mysterious shark that we still know remarkably little about, gathering most of what limited knowledge we do currently have from the relatively few scattered individuals that happen to turn up as accidental bycatch inside fishermen's trawls and long lines. Consider everything covered across this entire story so far, and notice just how recently almost every single major discovery actually happened. The landmark study that finally confirmed this species could plausibly live beyond 400 years was only formally published in the year 2016. The shark's complete genome was not successfully sequenced for the very first time until September of 2024. The recent study directly challenging decades of assumptions surrounding this shark's supposed blindness was not published until January of 2026. Stop and think carefully about that specific timeline for a moment. An animal potentially capable of living up to 500 years remained almost entirely unstudied by modern science until sometime within roughly just the last decade. Multiple major, headline-making breakthroughs concerning this exact species have happened within the last few years alone, several arriving well within your own personal lifetime if you're watching this video right now. This pattern reveals something genuinely important about the overall scale and overall mystery of Earth's deep ocean as an environment. Scientists frequently point out that humans currently possess more detailed, more accurate maps of the surface of the Moon and the surface of Mars than we currently possess of our own planet's deep ocean floor. A creature this large, this genuinely strange, and living this extraordinarily long, managed to stay almost completely hidden, simply because so much of its natural habitat remains almost entirely unexplored by humans, even now, in the present day. This same remoteness that helped keep this ancient species hidden and protected for literally centuries at a time has recently begun working directly against it instead. As modern human activity increasingly begins reaching even the deepest, most remote corners of the entire ocean floor. An animal that has successfully survived for nearly 400 years should logically seem almost indestructible by any reasonable measure. Yet the exact same biological traits that allow the Greenland shark to live this extraordinarily long also make it dangerously vulnerable to a much newer, faster-moving modern threat, one it never had to face or adapt to across its entire multi-century lifespan until now. A significant scientific study revealing that Greenland sharks can live up to 400 years and do not even reach puberty until around their 150th birthday makes this species uniquely susceptible to extinction, according to a marine researcher studying the species. Think carefully back through everything we have already learned across this entire story. This shark needs roughly 150 years just to reach full sexual maturity. Afterward, it may remain pregnant for up to 18 additional years before finally giving birth. This species was clearly built by evolution to reproduce slowly, patiently, and only occasionally across an extremely long overall lifespan, a strategy that worked perfectly fine for literally hundreds of years, right up until humans began operating large-scale industrial fishing fleets across the open ocean. These specific findings could seriously affect the Greenland shark's overall conservation status, since such slow growth combined with genuinely limited reproduction makes this particular species especially vulnerable to the ongoing pressures of commercial overfishing. Picture a savings account that only adds a tiny amount of new money, roughly once every 150 years. If someone repeatedly withdraws money from that account faster than new deposits can slowly accumulate, the entire account eventually collapses completely, and it would take an enormous, almost unimaginable stretch of time to ever properly recover and rebuild. Greenland shark populations currently face this exact same fundamental mathematical problem in the wild. Modern commercial fishing frequently catches Greenland sharks completely by accident, as unintended bycatch while actively targeting entirely different species instead. Each individual shark lost this way, especially any shark still years or even decades away from ever successfully reproducing even once, represents a genuinely serious, difficult to reverse setback for the species as a whole, given how astonishingly long recovery would realistically take. Researchers studying this exact issue point out that Greenland sharks are currently listed as near threatened on the official IUCN Red List of threatened species, while separately being listed as DARDA deficient specifically on the Norwegian Red List, reflecting how much uncertainty still genuinely remains surrounding this particular species' true overall population size and current conservation status. This creates a deeply troubling, almost paradoxical situation. An animal that has already successfully survived for literally centuries, quietly outlasting entire human civilizations along the way, could now potentially disappear within a mere handful of decades, purely because modern industrial fishing methods move exponentially faster than this species' extremely slow, patient reproductive cycle could ever possibly keep pace with or recover from. Everything modern science has managed to learn about this remarkable creature, its extreme age, its unique genetics, and its slow, patient biology, ultimately points toward one final, much larger question. What can studying and protecting this ancient survivor genuinely teach us about our own species and about the fundamental nature of aging itself? A shark drifting silently through freezing Arctic darkness holds genetic secrets that could someday help reshape how scientists understand human aging itself. This is not distant, far-fetched science fiction. It is the actual, genuine motivation driving real researchers currently studying this exact remarkable species today. By researching more long-lived species like the Greenland shark, scientists can develop a significantly better overall understanding of the aging process across many different species, potentially including the specific genetic toolkits that might eventually prove useful and adaptable for direct human application someday in the future. We have already carefully traced this shark's most important secrets across this entire story. An idling, ultra-slow metabolism, 81 duplicated DNA repair genes, one uniquely altered guardian gene, and cells apparently capable of successfully resisting cancer, far more effectively than almost any other large, long-lived animal currently known to science. Each individual piece connects directly and meaningfully to the others, together forming one unified, evolving portrait of an animal that has genuinely, measurably solved several of biology's most difficult and persistent aging-related puzzles. A researcher specializing in this exact field of study points out that evolution does not always follow the exact same identical genetic path toward reaching the very same biological outcome, meaning that if the fundamental underlying goal is simply achieving better, overall DNA repair, that same basic goal can potentially be reached through multiple entirely different genetic mechanisms, some already successfully found in naked mole rats, some found in whales, and some found specifically in sharks like this one. That single scientific insight carries enormous, genuinely exciting potential going forward. If researchers can successfully identify several different, independent biological solutions to the exact same fundamental aging problem, they gain multiple, completely different potential starting points for eventually developing entirely new human medical treatments someday, rather than being forced to rely on just one single, narrow genetic approach or strategy. A neurobiologist involved in this exact area of research noted that exploring the underlying genetic basis behind the enormous natural diversity of lifespans found across different animal species offers a genuinely fresh, completely new scientific perspective for properly investigating the underlying mechanisms that specifically enable truly exceptional biological longevity. Future scientific studies building on this current research may eventually provide valuable new insights directly relevant to human aging research and to various age-related human diseases as well. None of this means humans will ever realistically live for 400 years. That specific outcome remains firmly in the territory of pure science fiction, rather than genuine scientific possibility. Sharks remain evolutionarily quite distant from humans overall, and our fundamental biological systems differ in deeply significant ways, meaning scientists cannot simply copy this exact shark-based genetic solution directly over into human biology and expect similar dramatic results. What this ongoing research genuinely does offer is something quietly more valuable, one additional important piece contributing toward a much larger, ongoing scientific puzzle, patiently studying nature's own most successful long-term survival experiments, then carefully searching for shared underlying patterns that might eventually help humans live not necessarily dramatically longer, but genuinely healthier lives across whatever natural lifespan we ultimately do have. Somewhere right now, in freezing water darker and colder than almost anywhere else on this entire planet, a shark that has already personally outlived nearly every human civilization in recorded history continues drifting forward, patient, ancient, and almost completely unbothered by the passage of time itself. It survived by moving slowly, by healing constantly, and by treating every single limitation nature placed in front of it as simply one more problem still waiting patiently to be solved.